Now, just a quick warning before I get into it, but there's going to be some spoilers for the first 2 episodes of Ahsoka in this video, so if you haven't seen them yet, you may want to click away. Okay, so I know I'm almost certainly not the first person to do this, nor will I be the last, or have probably done it the best. But I've seen some people sort of discussing or debating if the scene we get at the end of the 2nd episode of Ahsoka, where Sabine visits the mural and then Ahsoka shows up with her ship and takes her away, if that's supposed to be the same scene that we get at the end of Rebels or during the epilogue after the final episode. Or if maybe that one, the one in Rebels, is the first time these two go off together to basically begin Sabine's training and do whatever else they did in their time together. Maybe, or most likely, to hunt down Ezra, especially considering Ahsoka's promise to Ezra that she would come and find him in the World Between Worlds episode of Rebels, and Sabine very much seems to miss him and believes he could still be alive and well out there somewhere. Anyway, even though I think there are plenty of reasons or evidence to suggest that yes, they are absolutely and quite obviously meant to be one and the same, despite some differences that we'll get into, I just wanted to run the 2 scenes side by side for comparison and to see what we get or how they line up for the fun of it. And though, no, as you're seeing, it's not anywhere close to this sort of 1-to-1 match, there are many differences, mainly being the live-action version feels much slower and more drawn out to be a little more dramatic, I'd imagine. Though that said, I think there are some key things that do indeed align, most importantly, Sabine tapping on Ezra in both versions and doing it roughly in the same spot and in the same way. I think that's supposed to be this rather blatant way of saying, yes, they are the same scenes, even if not everything is identical between them. Also, something you have to keep in mind about the mural itself is that in the first episode of Ahsoka here, they were having a dedication ceremony for it, meaning that, well, it's probably brand new at this point in time, right? And thus Sabine couldn't have been there a few years ago, or however long it may have been, the first time Ahsoka showed up because it didn't exist yet. And sure, I suppose it's possible that it had been there for years before having a dedication ceremony, but I think that's highly unlikely. That just doesn't make much sense. If Filoni really wanted to imply there's a chance it'd been there for a while, he could have simply called it a anniversary of the Battle of Lothal or something like that, rather than again calling it a dedication ceremony. I think, again, it's very much trying to imply that these 2 scenes are supposed to be one and the same, despite the differences. That Filoni wanted there to be a big and sort of symbolic connection between that Rebels epilogue and these first 2 episodes of Ahsoka. He wanted to give us a sort of full explanation or backstory for that epilogue scene, and then to carry on the story directly after it in Ahsoka, or after these first 2 episodes. Also, Sabine looks pretty much identical in both, right down to the haircut and the armor looking the same and having the same bag over her shoulder. Now sure, in the Rebels version, she puts her helmet on and walks away, or walks towards Ahsoka, and they don't say anything to each other, and the music swells and the epilogue ends. And though I think that same sort of thing could have worked, given how both had been sort of in the wrong or been stubborn, and so maybe they just don't have to say anything to each other before they go off, they kind of just get it and silently agree to let the past problems die. I think that obviously Filoni wanted the 2 to now say something to each other before going off together to just let everyone know exactly what's going on here. All that said, perhaps the biggest change between the 2 versions is no more Ahsoka the White, as she's been called or nicknamed. She is no longer wearing the white robes and doesn't have the staff she did in the Rebels epilogue. And I think that's rather unfortunate or even a bit disappointing because I've always believed it implied that Ahsoka had done or gone somewhere interesting at some point, or had some type of profound or spiritual experience that had changed her and maybe even in a sense evolved her, not unlike Gandalf the White. And though, sure, something like that could have still happened, we have no idea where Ahsoka's been or what she's been up to for the past 10 years or so in story, ever since she had her experience in the World Between Worlds, where Ezra pulled her in there and saved her from Vader, and she made that aforementioned promise to him. She's basically MIA for the whole original trilogy, and we're still waiting to see that first meeting with Luke Skywalker and her, the first time she meets the son of her former master. Which I actually think could and maybe likely will happen in this series. I think this is absolutely set before the Book of Boba Fett. I think it has to be where we see them together and it's obviously not their first meeting. And I say that because, well, we know that in The Mandalorian Season 2, which is absolutely set before the Book of Boba Fett, given Grogu and Mando are separated at the start of it and then reunite in it. But that's where we see, in Mando Season 2, Episode 5, we see Ahsoka essentially capture Morgan Elsbeth. And that's also got to be more or less when Ahsoka gets the location of the map from her. And so, assuming Ahsoka didn't decide to waste a whole bunch of time doing something else for some reason, assuming she immediately went to the planet we see here in the first episode to get that map, which, yeah, you'd think she'd do that, especially if she was afraid Morgan might have some sort of backup plan to protect it if captured, which she apparently did, since there were HK droids there on the planet willing to blow the damn thing up. Anyway, all that then means what we're seeing in the first and second episodes of Ahsoka should be taking place shortly after the 5th episode of The Mandalorian Season 2, and thus well before the Book of Boba Fett, given that's the episode where Mando and Ahsoka meet in Season 2 of The Mandalorian, and she sends Mando and Grogu to Tython to hopefully make contact with the Jedi. And that's where, of course, Grogu gets taken by Gideon, and then it takes who knows exactly how long for Mando to locate Gideon's ship and launch the rescue effort that brings Luke Skywalker to rescue them all. And then Luke, takes Grogu with him for training, and they spend who knows exactly how long together, or how long Mando and Grogu are apart, before Mando shows up to give him the gift, at which point Ahsoka is there with Luke for reasons we don't know exactly why. I mean, sure, it could be to ask for his help with finding the map and everything with Thrawn, but that seems really strange because, again, this would be quite some time after she learned about its location. We're talking weeks, if not months or more at this point. It is much, much more likely that she's already done with everything we'll see in the Ahsoka series and is visiting Luke for a whole other reason, maybe to tell him Thrawn has returned from this other galaxy. Though Luke didn't seem all too concerned with whatever she was there to tell him, he just went on training Grogu, though maybe he thought training new Jedi was the best way to help at that particular moment. So in other words here, I have a very hard time believing Ahsoka waited potentially weeks or even months to go to the planet in search of the map after learning its location. I also think it's kind of odd that Morgan Elsbeth was still on what I think was kind of implied to be a ship that was transporting her to meet with Home 1, which is essentially the flagship of the New Republic. I don't know why such an important or high-value prisoner would be kept on this random ship for so long and carted all over space instead of being brought somewhere else, somewhere much more secure, which clearly this ship was not, since 2 Jedi broke her out. To me it seems like, and what makes sense is, that this ship met with Ahsoka immediately after Ahsoka took Morgan Elsbeth prisoner, and she immediately contacted the New Republic to take her away. And this is when she, of course, got the location of the map from her as well. Then Ahsoka immediately went to look for the map and found it, as we see in the first episode of the series. After that, she learned that someone, Baylan and Shin, had already broken Morgan out, and here we are with everything else we see in the series. Meaning, again, this would have to be well before the Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka being with Luke, therefore not the first time. And hopefully that all makes sense the way I explained it. You get what I'm trying to say here. I almost feel like drawing some sort of map or diagram because there are other potential issues, let's say, with the timeline that I've already thought of and how things align or maybe don't align so well. Either way, I'm kind of hoping that at some point in this Ahsoka series, we will get the first meeting between Luke and Ahsoka. That she'll come to him and maybe ask for his help with everything she's doing, or at the very least let him know what's going on with Thrawn and the Imperial Remnant and so on. Or maybe to just talk with him about Anakin, or for some other reason that they'll finally meet for the very first time. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about any and all of this. Are the scenes at the end of the second episode and the epilogue in Rebels one and the same? Or do you think they're somehow supposed to be different? And when do you think this series takes place? Does my figuring here about it being well before the Book of Boba Fett, does that make sense to you or not? Do you think it could be somehow after that show? Whatever you do think, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.